Do you wake up with cold feet? And I don't mean nervous, I mean literally cold, even under a warm blanket? Do your hands feel stiff before you've even gotten out of bed? Most people blame this on getting older, on a chilly house, on just how my body's always been, but there's a good chance your body is describing something much more specific and much more important than simple aging. Today I want to walk you through 5 morning symptoms that most people brush off completely, symptoms that are often early warning signs of poor circulation. And here's what makes this urgent to talk about. Poor circulation isn't a separate problem from everything we've discussed on this channel. It's often the direct downstream result of the same process we've been unpacking episode after episode: elevated blood sugar and insulin quietly damaging your blood vessels from the inside, years before you'd ever notice on a standard checkup. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which morning signals deserve your attention, why they happen, and what you can start doing about it today, starting from the moment your feet hit the floor tomorrow morning. Let's talk about what's actually happening inside your blood vessels, because once you understand this, these 5 symptoms stop feeling random and start making perfect sense. Picture the inside of a healthy blood vessel like a smooth, flexible garden hose. Blood flows through it easily, the walls can expand and contract as needed, and every part of your body, down to your fingertips and toes, gets a steady, generous supply of oxygen-rich blood. That flexibility depends heavily on a molecule called nitric oxide, which we've talked about before. Nitric oxide is produced by the inner lining of your blood vessels, called the endothelium, and it's essentially the signal that tells your vessels, relax, open up, let the blood through. Now here's the problem. Chronically elevated blood sugar creates something called glycation, glucose molecules essentially gluing themselves onto proteins throughout your body, including the proteins that make up your blood vessel walls. Over time, this glycation process stiffens tissue that's supposed to stay flexible. We covered this in detail in a previous episode on reversing the aging of your arteries. At the same time, elevated glucose generates oxidative stress, a flood of unstable molecules that actively damage the endothelium and destroy nitric oxide before it can do its job. Put those two things together, stiffening vessel walls and a damaged inner lining that can't properly signal relax and open, and you get vessels that are narrower, less flexible, and less able to deliver blood efficiently to the far edges of your body. Your fingers, your toes, the tips of your extremities, which are the farthest points from your heart and the first places to feel the effects when circulation isn't what it should be. Think of it like the water pressure in a house with old, narrow pipes. The kitchen sink closest to the main line might still run at a reasonable pressure, but the bathroom at the far end of the second floor, at the end of that same narrowing pipe system, is going to be the first place you notice the water running weak and thin. Your circulatory system works the same way. Your heart, your major organs, they're the kitchen sink, close to the source, usually the last to show a problem. Your fingers and toes are that upstairs bathroom, and they're almost always the first to reveal that something's changed in the pipes. And here's why mornings specifically matter so much. Overnight, while you're lying still for 6, 7, 8 hours, your circulation naturally slows down simply because you're not moving. In a healthy vascular system, your body compensates for this easily. Vessels stay flexible enough to keep blood moving efficiently even at rest. But in a system already dealing with stiffened, damaged vessels, that natural overnight slowdown becomes much more noticeable. That's why symptoms of poor circulation often show up loudest first thing in the morning, before you've moved around enough to get things flowing again. Here's why almost nobody connects these dots. Cold feet, stiff hands, morning grogginess, these feel like separate, unrelated, minor annoyances. One gets blamed on the house being cold. Another gets blamed on sleeping wrong. Another gets blamed on needing coffee. Nobody sits down and says, wait, what if all 4 of these things are actually connected to the same underlying cause? But when you understand that circulation problems and insulin resistance are 2 branches of the exact same tree, both rooted in chronically elevated blood sugar damaging your vascular system, these morning symptoms stop looking random. They start looking like a pattern. There's also a second reason these signs get ignored so easily, and it has to do with timing. A standard checkup happens once a year in the middle of the day after you've already been up and moving for hours. By the time you're sitting in that exam room, your circulation has usually caught up and normalized. Whatever your body was doing at 6 in the morning simply isn't visible anymore by the time a doctor examines you at 2 in the afternoon. That's part of why these morning-specific symptoms are so easy for even a good doctor to miss. The evidence has usually faded by the time anyone's looking for it. Let me tell you about Frank. Frank is 73 years old, spent 40 years as a mechanic before retiring, and he told me something that stuck with me. I've had cold feet my whole life. I just figured that's who I am. His father had the same complaint, so Frank always assumed it was simply genetic, unrelated to anything else. About 2 years ago, Frank noticed his morning symptoms getting more pronounced. Not just cold feet, his fingers would feel stiff and slightly numb for the first 10 or 15 minutes after waking, almost like he'd slept on them wrong every single morning. He also noticed that if he pressed on the skin of his shin, the pale spot left behind seemed to take longer than it used to before the normal color returned. At a routine visit, Frank mentioned this to his doctor almost as an afterthought, expecting to be told it was nothing. Instead, his doctor connected it to his most recent labs, which showed a fasting glucose creeping into pre-diabetic range, something Frank hadn't paid much attention to because he felt otherwise fine. His doctor explained that the same elevated glucose affecting his pancreas was very likely affecting the smallest blood vessels in his hands and feet as well. Frank started applying several of the protocols we've discussed on this channel. He adopted the plate method for his meals, added a short walk after his largest meal of the day, and specifically increased his intake of the anti-inflammatory fats we covered in an earlier video, extra virgin olive oil, fatty fish, walnuts, all of which support the health of the endothelium and nitric oxide production. He also started his mornings with the 30-second protocol we've discussed before, getting his circulation moving deliberately rather than waiting for it to catch up on its own. Within about 10 weeks, Frank told me the difference was obvious to him before any lab test confirmed it. His feet still got cold occasionally, but the stiffness in his fingers each morning had essentially disappeared, and that delayed color return on his skin had normalized. He also mentioned, almost in passing, that he no longer needed those first 15 minutes of the morning just to warm up and feel normal. He could get moving almost right away. I spent 70 years thinking cold feet was just who I was, he told me. Turns out it was just a message I never bothered reading. What I appreciate most about Frank's story is how ordinary it is. He wasn't dealing with a dramatic health scare. He was dealing with a handful of small, easy-to-dismiss morning annoyances that most people, including most doctors in a rushed appointment, would never think to connect to blood sugar at all. That's exactly why I wanted to make this video, because the signs that matter most are so often the ones that feel the least alarming. So let's go through the 5 morning signs, one at a time, so you know exactly what to watch for in your own body. Sign number 1, cold hands and feet, even in a warm house, even under blankets. This is the most obvious one, but people dismiss it constantly because it feels so minor. If your extremities are consistently cold while the rest of you feels fine, that's a direct signal that blood flow to those areas isn't what it should be. Sign number 2, tingling or a pins and needles sensation in your fingers or toes when you first wake up, especially if it takes longer than a few minutes to fade. Occasional numbness from sleeping in an odd position is normal. A pattern of it, morning after morning, without an obvious mechanical cause, is worth paying attention to. Sign number 3, legs that feel stiff, heavy, or achy the moment you stand up before you've even started moving around. This is different from ordinary morning stiffness that fades in seconds. This is a heaviness that lingers, sometimes for several minutes, as your circulation works to catch up after hours of relative stillness. Some people describe it as their legs feeling like they're waking up slower than the rest of their body, which is a fairly accurate description of exactly what's happening at the vascular level. Sign number 4, skin that stays pale or takes noticeably longer than it should to pink back up after you press on it. Try this yourself, press firmly on the skin of your shin for a few seconds, then release and watch how quickly the color returns. In healthy circulation, that should happen almost instantly. A delay is a simple, at-home way of noticing what's happening beneath the surface. Sign number 5, a dull, low-grade morning headache or a thick sense of brain fog before your first cup of coffee that seems to lift gradually as you move around and your circulation picks up. Your brain is extraordinarily sensitive to blood flow, and if circulation is sluggish first thing in the morning, that can show up as mental fog just as easily as physical symptoms elsewhere in your body. Many people reach straight for caffeine the moment this hits, and while a cup of coffee can genuinely help you feel more alert, it's worth asking whether you're treating the actual cause or simply masking it for another few hours until it creeps back in tomorrow morning. None of these 5 signs on their own mean something is seriously wrong, but just like we've discussed with other topics on this channel, it's the pattern that matters. If you're noticing 2, 3, or more of these consistently, that's worth a real conversation with your doctor. Not because it's an emergency, but because your circulation is sending you information you deserve to understand. And unlike a once-a-year blood draw, these are signs you have access to every single morning for free if you simply pay attention to them. So what can you actually do about this, starting today? First, move within the first few minutes of waking up. This doesn't need to be complicated. Our 30-second morning protocol, calf raises, a few squats, some arm circles, and a glass of cold water, was designed exactly for this purpose. It jumpstarts circulation deliberately, rather than leaving your vascular system to catch up on its own over the first hour of your day. The calf raises in particular matter more than people realize because your calf muscles act almost like a second pump for your circulatory system, pushing blood back up from your lower legs toward your heart every time they contract. Second, apply the same post-meal walking habit we've discussed before, ideally within 30 minutes of your largest meal. This does double duty. It helps manage the glucose spike from that meal while also encouraging healthy circulation throughout your body, including to your extremities, since movement itself is one of the simplest ways to support blood flow all the way to your fingers and toes. Third, prioritize the anti-inflammatory fats we've covered previously, extra virgin olive oil, fatty fish rich in omega-3s, walnuts, and avocado. These directly support the health of your endothelium and your body's ability to produce nitric oxide, which is the exact molecule responsible for keeping your blood vessels flexible and open. Fourth, keep an eye on your sodium and hydration together, not separately. Both dehydration and excess sodium can affect blood volume and vessel function, and getting this balance right supports circulation throughout the day, not just in the morning. A simple habit here is drinking a full glass of water before your morning coffee, since coffee itself has a mild dehydrating effect and you want your blood volume working in your favor, not against you, right from the start of the day. Fifth, don't underestimate consistent movement throughout your entire day, not just the first few minutes after waking. Long stretches of sitting at a desk, in a car, in front of the television allow the same overnight-style slowdown to happen during the day. Standing up and moving for even 2 or 3 minutes every hour keeps that circulation you work to start in the morning from stalling out again by mid-afternoon. And sixth, do that simple skin press test on your shin every so often. It costs nothing, takes 5 seconds, and gives you a rough, at-home sense of how your circulation is responding to the changes you're making over time, the same way Frank's own observations led him to a conversation that changed his morning routine completely. As always, I want to be clear that nothing in this video replaces an actual conversation with your doctor, especially if you're noticing several of these signs together, or if you have any existing circulation or cardiovascular concerns. Persistent numbness, significant swelling, skin discoloration, or sores that won't heal should always be evaluated properly by a professional, and you should never adjust any prescribed medication without your physician's guidance. This video is meant to help you notice patterns sooner and describe them more precisely at your next appointment, not to replace the expertise of the person actually examining you. If today's video helped you recognize something in your own mornings, share it with someone who's always complained about cold feet and just assumed it was normal. It might be the nudge they need to actually ask about it. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do for someone you care about isn't a big dramatic conversation, it's simply forwarding them 5 minutes that helps them notice something they've been living with for years without ever questioning it. And we're getting close now to that episode I keep mentioning, the one on sleep, and exactly how a single bad night raises your blood sugar the very next day. Given everything we just covered about circulation slowing down overnight, that connection is going to make even more sense once you see it. That video is coming very soon, and once you see how directly your nights, your mornings, and your vascular health are all connected, I think it's going to reshape how you think about your entire daily routine. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.